Hey guys and gals, and welcome to another video from the team here at BlenderTech.com. Even if it's just a fun video, if you enjoy it or learn something from the video, consider liking it and to subscribe to our channel for more Blender, Unity 3D coding, and all sorts of other CG related videos. Lastly, don't forget our motto, create your way. So I actually have done the math. In the 90 odd days that BlenderTech has been around, I have released personally over 100 videos. So that is, yeah, just over one a day. So I've definitely been putting some work in, but I'm slowly changing that to do more quality videos at a slower pace. I've been recommended this, and I found that that's been bringing me more, I don't want to say success, but just betterness overall to make up words. Anyways, the topic for today is the Blender 2.73 RC1. So we've got the release notes here. They haven't changed much from the what is it called, the test build, but they did add a few different things. But first of all, I just wanted to go, if you don't know, or if you do know how alpha, beta, and RCs work, just skip the next 45 seconds. So if you don't know what an RC is, a release candidate, there's this good graph here. Basically, you have a pre-alpha, which is kind of like you're planning the program. You've got the basic stuff down. It's very buggy. It crashes a lot. Then you've got an alpha, which is like, it's software that runs. It's usable. Then you've got a beta, and that's kind of what our daily builds have been lately, and that's very usable software. It rarely crashes. There's few bugs. Most of the features are implemented, and you're happy enough you'd like to put your name on it and put it out to the public. But then you have a release candidate right here, which is aka gamma or delta if you go in the alpha, beta, Charlie, whatever system. So a release candidate, or RC in the tech world, is basically, it's a polished, almost finished release. It's got 99% of the features of the final product. There just might be a few bugs here and there. It might crash, 1 in 1,000 times. It might, it might be missing a few things, but basically it's the final product. So they have the release candidate. They put it out for testing, and Blender actually did do an article on this, how they said they were going to do this release, and they're doing it exactly like this graph here. So they're going to do the RC, which they've just released approximately 12 hours ago. I was up, but I missed it. I don't check the Blender website that often, only about once a day. And then they do what's called an RTM, a return to marketing, or release to marketing, or release to manufacturing, depending if it's a product or a piece of software. In this case, it's a piece of software. So basically, they take all the input from the testers, from the public, anything they can find. They make a few changes, a few tweaks, and then they give out the release. So I would expect the release to be first 2 weeks of January at the latest, because I've been tracking the bugs. There's really not very many left, and in terms of major ones, there's nothing game breaking. So I would expect the 2.73 release imminently. That said, it's not like brand new software. It's not like going from Blender 2.5 to 2.6, that huge step that we had back then. This is obviously a much smaller release, but there's some very, very cool things. So I will be going over the release notes, but first let's open it up. So as you can see, I've been playing with the daily builds a lot. I played with the test build. I didn't really enjoy it too much. I went back to the daily build, the December 20th, which I've been using since then. And now they've got the release candidate 1, so RC1. In addition to all my other software. If you guys, someone do the math for me. Tell me how much I've spent on software, because I don't want to know, actually. Anyways, let's open up RC1 and let's see what it looks like. Surprise! It doesn't look any different at all, except that they've made a new in my opinion, much better looking little splash screen. And I've got the factory settings because I reverted them for my little call for helps that I was doing. But that's good, I guess, because then we've got factory settings. The only changes, let's see if I've still got screencast keys enabled. No, so I'm just going to enable those quickly. Ooh, I have lost my screencast keys. Give me 1 minute. Hopefully I've edited the script myself. Hopefully it works. Alright, I've installed it. Let's see if it works. Woo, okay, perfect. I'm just going to make a couple more tweaks and then we will get started. Alright, so basically, yeah, nothing's changed except for the splash screen at first glance. So, the first thing I want to show you, which I think is one of the most, or the coolest and most useful add-ons that they've made, which I noticed in the daily builds by accident, and I'll go to the page here, is, where is it? The 3D view got an option to display the world background. So let me show you how that works. If we go into our world settings and I'm on Blender Render. If we go cycles, sorry, and we use nodes, if we add an environment texture, now this is just a low quality one, so forgive that. Oh, my bookmarks, I have to do all that again. Give me 1 second. Documents, no, see, users, download, not documents, downloads. It is right here. So if we add an environment texture, there is a way. Now, how did I figure this out before? You can actually see it in the 3D viewport in non-rendered mode. Now, how did I do that? Okay, so if you open up the end panel and go to display, you can hit world background and that displays the world environment texture that you've loaded into your scene. So this is very useful for doing scenes when you're using an environment texture. And I believe it would work the same way if you just set it up as a sky texture. Yeah, exactly. So obviously that's not the one I would want off. I would want the blue one, but I'm not going to go into that. But anyways, yeah, you get the environment texture in your viewport. So I'm not in rendered mode. I'm just in regular solid whatever mode. Wireframe, it doesn't matter. You get to see the actual environment texture. Now this can be distracting, so it is good that you can turn it on or off. And on top of that, you can press the only render, so it'll only show you the objects that will be rendered out, so only my cube. And if I tab into edit mode, it works exactly the same. It gets rid of stuff like cameras and lights and the grid floor that you wouldn't see in the render. So that's kind of useful too. I don't know if this is new, but it adds on to the being able to see the environment background, because now I can click that and I can say, okay, here's the road. I'm going to add a giant concrete block in the middle of the road. Boom, just like that. So yeah, that's kind of where that's useful. So yeah, I like that. So that is, in my opinion, one of the coolest new features. What else do we got? Let me just go back to stock here. All right, I'm gonna get rid of my background and go back to disconnect. Just go back to the stock one. Pie menus. It says user interface pie menus, confirm threshold, and nested pie menus. Now that doesn't, I'm not going to go into detail about that, but does that mean that by stock pie menus are enabled? Well, let's find out. If I press tab, no, we still go into edit mode. If I press Q, no, I don't get my view selection. So let's find out why that is. Let's see if it's a user settings or an add-on. Go into add-ons, search up pie. So it looks like pie menus are still going to be are still going to have to be enabled. Now, this could be because they're going to overhaul all the hotkeys in an imminent release or the next, in either this release or the next release. But I know it's being talked about either way, so they're going to be changing a lot of the hotkeys, so that could be why. However, yeah, basically the pie menus aren't a default option yet. It could change in the final release, which I hope it does, because I like pie menus. I got used to them for the longest time. However, when I'm doing tutorials, I don't use them because most people don't have them enabled, even though they've been around for ages now. Well, not ages, but quite a while. In terms of the user preferences, nothing's changed. The only thing is the testing add-ons, they've gotten rid of quite a few. I don't know if they've added it to the official. It looks like no in this instance, or community. I would have to go through it, but it looks like they've said no, we're not going to add a lot of these add-ons in this release, but they've still got these ones considering that they're still considering. So the test, I'm running out of breath. The testing category, so there's still a lot of good ones that might make it in there. They also mention a new full screen mode with super clean UI. Now, I don't know if that's been fully implemented yet, because when I do that, the hotkey is either shift space or control up and down, which is my personal way to use it. So when I do that, it looks, I think, the same as before. There's this nice back to previous button. I've never noticed it before, but I did notice it now, so that could be handy. So I don't know if this is their full screen mode, but hey, it is full screen regardless. So maybe they've changed some things. I can't tell you for sure, but that is something to be aware of. Because if I have 2.72b open, which I do now, and do the same thing, it looks exactly the same. So that compared to that, I see no difference. So that is questionable yet. Maybe they're just saving it for final release. Maybe I'll keep this open for some comparisons. Another very cool one that I've been waiting for and I haven't really tested out yet, the knife tool, being able to do freehand cuts. Let's see if that has made it into the release candidates. So we have our cube here. I'm just going to subdivide it a bunch of times. Let's cut into it. So I am just going to go to some random view. I'm going to use the knife tool by pressing K, and I'm going to do a freehand cut. So I'm just going to... Yep, it's kind of a freehand cut, but it's still snapping to edges. So ignore snap is an option. So let's try that. So obviously we could do things like that in the old version. So I'm going to undo that. So let's hit knife tool again. This time I'm going to press shift to ignore snap. Let's see what happens. It's still snapping. Interesting. Okay, well, let's try something else. I'm going to go and let's see. Press E for a new cut. No. It doesn't seem to be all the what I would call totally freehand. Let's compare it to Blender 2.72. So in Blender 2.72, if I did the same thing and then brought out the knife tool and tried to make a freehand cut, aha, you cannot. Let's try, however, clicking on an edge and doing it. You cannot. You can only do the old school cuts where they either had to be a straight line, or if you pressed C, you would get either a 45 or a 90-degree angle, depending on where your cut was from. So this is 45 degrees to my cut. This is 90 degrees to my cut. So that is actually changed. I used the knife tool a lot and I didn't even notice that. So yeah, you can do freehand cutting. So I want to cut this cube apart. So I'm going to get into an angle like this. When I open my knife tool with K, I'm going to hold down. I don't actually need to ignore snap. So I'm just going to press Z to cut through. So there's add-ons that did this before, but now it's an actual official tool, I guess you could call it. So let's make a freehand cut right through the object. Okay, now it's not going freehand. Let me release and click again. There we go. No. Okay. Knife tool, Z to cut through, shift to ignore snap. I'm still not getting the freehand cut. What the heck? At all. So we've cut a nice polygon out, but that wasn't working as before. Why not? Maybe buggy? Because now I kind of do freehand cuts. They're still made up of polygon, or straight lines, sorry, but it is freehand-ish. So why can't I do it from this angle? Knife tool. Is it perhaps the cut through option I'm trying? Yes, okay, so for some reason using Z to cut through is maybe a bug because it's not allowing me to do a freehand cut. So I'm going to complete this loop. I'm going to click. So I'm going to confirm this, but I'm going to press Z first because I want it to cut through. Now let's see if that works. So I'm going to hit enter. Okay, so it has cut through. So I could go and delete those vertices. So that's kind of cool. So it's not perfect. You have to press Z afterwards to get your freehand cut to work, but it is working regardless. So that is kind of cool. Let's delete this and let's make a new cube. I'm going to try another freehand cut. So you definitely need more geometry. You can't just cut totally freehand. You have to have the geometry to do a cut. So if I subdivided it, say 35 times or 25, sorry, yeah, I'm basically doing freehand cutting here. It's very, very fluid. So interesting, but I wouldn't say totally revolutionary. There's add-ons and things, and like in Maya and stuff, that you can do much more freehand. I would call this freehand polygonal. Freehand polygonal knife cutting. So yeah, anyways, enough of that. Let's see what else is interesting. This interested me when I saw the release notes a while ago. The select similar regions and skip adjacent faces while using the select more or less function. Now, unfortunately, since this is brand new, they don't have any documentation, so we kind of have to figure this out on our own. So let's try the select similar regions first. So I'm going to take my default cube. I'm going to subdivide it again, let's say twice. I'm going to select a face, and then I would assume it's in the select menu. Select similar. Okay, that's very cool. So we can select similar material, select similar image, select similar area, polygon size, perimeter, normal, coplanar, whatever, blah, 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 blah. So if I wanted to select all things of this exact same area, so whatever area this exact square is, I would just select similar, which is Shift G. So that's a new hotkey, Shift G, and I could choose polygon sides, so that would select all of them. So if I had one that was different, so I'm just gonna edit the verts here. I would guess I would have more than one that's different. So these are different areas now. So now if I select one of these, it's gonna select all of them except for that, or they're still the same area. Okay, well let's cut one up then. So I've basically just triangulated that. So I'm going to select this face, and then I'm going to select with the same number of sides. Okay, so yeah, it selected everything. Sorry, I was doing different ones. So it selected everything except for the ones with less or more sides. So it's not selected the tries in this case. Now, there was a way to do this in 2.72b by going select faces by sides, and then going F6, and you could choose the number of vertices. So equal to 4 would select quads, equal to 5, you get it. And I actually did a tutorial or a quick tip on this using greater than. So greater than 3 would select quads, or sorry, what was it? Yeah, so it was greater than 4 would select any n-gons, less than 4 would select any tries, and equal to 4 would select all quads. So there is a similar way to do that in the older version, but this is much easier because it's a hotkey, Shift G. And like I said, you can also do area. So if I select that same square and select by area, it's going to select everything that has the same area. So obviously it's skipping these, even though these are still quads here. It's skipping them because they're not the same area anymore. And even cooler if we set up 2 materials. So I'm going to make 2 materials. I'm going to make one is going to be white and one is going to be black. And I'm going to just select random, and I'm going to assign that black. And, I didn't do it in the viewport. Let's do that just so it's easy to see. And I'm going to go select inverse. Now this is nothing new, and I'm just going to assign it to white. I guess it already would be. So there you go. So this is what our cube looks like. So we can now select by material. So before you could have done this by selecting your material and hitting select, and that would have selected everything that was white. Is there any? So yeah, it's not the best example, I guess. I'm in face select mode. Maybe that's why. So deselect. So select everything that's white. Apparently it didn't work so well in earlier versions. Okay, kind of odd. Interesting. Let's try black. So I'm selecting everything that has this material on it, which is deleting almost everything. Interesting. Okay, but let's try this. So I'm going to select a black face, and then I'm going to go Shift G for similar. I'm going to select similar material. So it's selected all the black faces. So I'm going to delete faces. So it's deleted all the black faces, or in this case, all of those materials. So that's kind of neat. And obviously there's more things here. I'm not going to get into these because those are a lot more complex, but those are the 2 cool ones. Skip adjacent faces while using the select more less function. So in older versions, let's go back to our divided cube without the materials. I'll just re-add the cube and redivide it. So I'm going to make a mesh cube, tab into edit mode, and I'm going to subdivide a few times. So in earlier versions of Blender, well, in all versions of Blender previous, you could use numpad plus and minus. Okay, it's not, sorry, control numpad plus and minus to grow your selection. However, in some instances, this really didn't do what you want and wasn't very useful and was rarely used. But now, however, you can, well, let's find out how it's done because I haven't done this yet. So we can select more, F6, face step. So connected faces instead of edges. So now if I do the same thing, Shift R, it does that. Now is that the difference? Let's try this in the old version of Blender, 2.72b. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to Control plus to select more, F6. That option isn't there. So it just does that by stock. So now you can get that same effect, but we now have this option for face step. So that makes this a little more useful. But I don't think this is what we're getting at. So I don't know exactly where this is. And I'm not going to waste a bunch of time doing this. But somehow, and I haven't figured it out yet, so sorry, don't blame me. Like I said, there's no documentation. There's very little videos on 2.73 uploaded yet. So I'm still learning too. But somehow we can skip adjacent faces while using the select more/less function. And this is going to be so useful once I figure out how to do it. So I've select more less. Select more. F6. Select more. That's all I can do. If I bring up the toolbar panel, it's got nothing for me. And there's no options in here for that. And there's nothing in here. So, you teach me. You tell me how to make that work, because that will be very useful. Let's see what else is cool. So it says in sculpting, numerical input for changing brush size, detail size, and strength has been added. However, that's not available. I have always been able to type in the brush size I want, and it's just worked. It does that in this version, and it does it in 2.72b. So I don't know exactly where that would be. Again, you guys tell me. Brush strength can be changed for grab and snake hook brushes. That is great. If we take the grab brush, the strength, if we go to 2.72, the grab brush never had a strength. It just had a radius. So you just had a radius and you grabbed. But now we have a strength, so I can have full strength, or I can just have a little bit of strength. And especially now that I have a tablet, this can be very useful, because the grab brush is, I use it so often now that I know how to sculpt properly, because you can completely change your mesh this way in very organic ways. This is basically how you define your shapes in or doing digital sculpting. So having a strength option, super cool. However, I'm crying because there's no ability to set this to pen pressure. So hopefully that gets added in the final release. And the same with the snake hook. Before, there was no strength, but now again there's a strength. So we can pull a snake hook full strength. It's just going to keep going forever. Or we can use a very low strength. Ooh, it's very touchy. And we can just pull a little bit, just a little bit. So that's going to be, since I'm currently enrolled in a sculpting class, that's going to be a very nice addition. Even though we're using ZBrush, it's going to be a nice addition in Blender. So that's very neat. What else? Sequencer, I'm not going to get into because I don't use it often. I don't do a lot of that kind of stuff. I don't do a lot of video stuff, so you guys can look at that stuff. The freestyle NPR rendering, that's going to be kind of cool. So the freestyle, you've got this little preview here, has got an exporter, so you can see the freestyle lines have been exported as an SVG format, so that's very useful. So you could essentially model something in Blender and then output it as a drawing. So this will be useful for making animations. This will be useful for texturing, because you can export basically a wireframe and then do like paint. It's basically like a different kind of UV unwrapping, in my opinion. The grease pencil animation, I'm not going to go through that because we've already seen the video. If you haven't, go check it out. It's very cool. Just search up grease pencil animation test Blender on Google. Very, very, very cool. Graph Editor has revised the set of operators for showing hiding curves from the keyframes area and circle selection for curves. So if we go into the graph editor, apparently you can circle select stuff. I don't have an animation though, so maybe that's why nothing can happen. Let's go into object mode. Let's insert a keyframe. Let's grab it. or sorry, let's go to another frame. Let's grab it. Let's insert another one. Let's go into the graph editor. And we now have these. Oh yeah, okay, so I can circle select. Cool. And obviously I can move them. So I can deselect. I can just circle select those three. I can move them. So you can edit your curves that way. So in 2.72b, if I did the same thing, if I inserted a keyframe, grabbed it, inserted another keyframe, and then went into the graph editor. No brush select. I'm pressing C. You can hear it, but no brush select. I have to select them manually. So that is very cool. Very, very cool. So that is going to allow us to make smooth animation curve changes. Very, very cool. Import export. Collida importer. So it's improved the way Collida, however you want to pronounce it. I pronounce it Collida. So it's the compatibility of Blender Bones to other software's bones. We need a bit more detail on that, but that sounds very interesting for animating and using rigs. Fix problem with leaf bones. I've never run into this problem, so I don't know what that is. And fix problems with Blender's connection system. So I assume that the way bones are connected in a rig is fixed when it comes to importing and exporting Collidas. So again, we need more details. We need more documentation. This will come in time, but interesting. Add-ons. The FBX add-on now uses some advanced handling tweaking options for importing and exporting armatures. So FBX is another format that's very often used. So that's very cool. Although, again, I don't really use FBX too often, so we'll see. More features. Have they added anything to this page? Because it was very blank before. Yeah, not a lot. So there's a few changes. For example, the compositor's Gaussian blur node has been implemented in OpenCL. That's kind of nice. Oh yeah, added specular transparency support for Blender internal materials. That'll be nice for some people. And added support for specular highlights in cycles materials. If you don't know what that means, just ignore that. But that is a very nice add-on. Motion tracking, I do very little to none of that. But predictive tracking has been implemented now. So, it is enabled by default and all the magic happens secretly under the curtain. The way it works is quite simple. It uses previously tracked information of the track and tries to predict where the track would appear in the next frame. If prediction is impossible, track moves to that location and then being refined given a more accurate algorithm. Blah 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 blah. So basically it's tracking is going to be much easier and more accurate now. So that's kind of cool. That'll save time when it comes to doing motion tracking, which I'm actually going to release my first tutorial on sometime in the next couple weeks, I'm hoping. A new motion tracking screen layout. So let's see what that looks like. Actually, I can't notice any changes, so I'm gonna have to look a little bit more into this. Because yeah, if I bring up the clip editor right here, the video clip editor, and even click on track, it looks exactly the same as in 2.72b. So I would maybe have to actually import a video to see the changes. So I'll play with that. I'm not going to waste time on this video with that. So that's a few more things that they've brought in. Nothing too amazing. And bug fixes. Every Blender release has hundreds of bug fixes. You won't notice them, but just look at the list. There's so many things. Some of them amazing, some of them small. Read through them, but there's some very cool ones. Yeah, I'm not going to go through them all, obviously, but there are some very nice ones. So yeah, in conclusion, the grease pencils got a complete overhaul. The graph editor, that circle selection, very useful for making your own custom curves. Import exports got a little more features. and compatibility. The freestyle rendering has got some neat changes. The sequencer's got some changes, but I don't use it that often or at all, so I can't tell you a lot about it. Sculpting and painting apparently has some changes, but I haven't seen them yet, except for the brush strength for grab and snake hook brushes. Thank you, Blender team. The knife tool, we can now do freehand cuts and close cut loops, but via double click. I didn't show you that, but just try it. Just double click when you go to finalize your cut, and selecting similar regions, which we can do by material, area, all sorts of different things. So let's Shift G is the hotkey. The skip adjacent faces, I haven't figured out how to do that yet, but we do have one more function when we use that. I will quickly show that again because you might have missed it, I believe. So if we have our object and we go into edit mode and we select a face and hit Control plus to select more. If we bring up the operator panel, there's now face step. So that's a new feature that's been added. I just don't know how to skip faces. So I want to learn how to do that. But the UI, that's the major change, I think, from 2.73. So we have the new full screen mode. However, again, I haven't seen any changes, so maybe that'll come in the final release. We have pie menus. Again, it's not added by default, or it's not enabled by default, so that kind of confuses me. But the 3D view option to display the world background, so useful, so handy. No more having to toggle into rendered mode. So when you've got a very, very, very complicated scene that has an environment background, like an environment texture as a background, and you want to preview it, you would have to go into rendered mode before. And even with a high-end graphics card, if you had a complicated scene, yeah, you're not going to see a lot until it renders out. At least 5 to 10 samples. So that's so useful now that we can preview that in the 3D view under just regular modes. And lastly, cycles rendering. So I'm just going to mention this last. I'm not going to show you it because there's this example here and it's going to take too much time to show off. Volume rendering with cameras inside volume meshes. So I believe that means that you can now go inside of a mesh and render the look inside of a mesh. Cubic voxels interpolations to avoid artifacts. I believe that is this option here. If we go under experimental, sampling, correlated multi-jitter, no, that's not it. Okay, so cubic voxel interpolations to avoid artifacts. So voxels are volume pixels, so I don't know exactly what the changes do, but I guess it's gonna make volume rendering look better and have less artifacts. Faster rendering of homogeneous volumes, so that would be things such as well, for example, fog is not a homogeneous volume, for example, whereas, say, just a cube with nothing is homogeneous. Think of it like a solution. Homogeneous solutions versus non-homogeneous solutions. Support for GeForce 9XX GPU, so that's the latest GeForce GPU, so that's nice because I'm gonna buy one soon. Improve rendering with area lights. So if you pop in a new area light, apparently it's got improved rendering. I really would have to test this more before I could see what the changes actually look like, but apparently it's a lot better looking now. I can't tell right offhand, but we'll see. And in viewport specularity, again, very, very cool. So what that means is in the 3D viewport, you now have specularity. So where our lamp is, you can see that faces are highlighted differently based on where the light is. So if I move the light, and move the camera around, it's going to change the way the specularity is depending on the material. It's very minor. It would show up more in a lot more a lot more advanced scene. You can't see it in real time, it looks like, or maybe it's because I'm using an aerial. I don't know. I have to do more testing. Like I said, this was just released a few hours ago, so this is the first time I'm really playing with it for more than 5 minutes. So yeah, we'll see. But yeah, viewport specularity would be a very nice thing. I possibly maybe not implemented yet because it looks like it's not really working. And if you look at this picture though, this looks like the volume rendering that they're talking about. Oh, cool. They've got lots of examples. So, this is the improved area light sampling. So you can look at old versus new, obviously way better. So it renders at roughly the same time, but with much less noise, and it looks a little bit more realistic. So that's very cool because you use area lights quite often, or at least I do. What else? Missing notes. So there's a few more things that they've done, but they just haven't made notes on yet. So look at that too. There's some cool things. Max bounces added for lamps, so that will decrease or increase render times. You can now change how many bounces your lamps will have. Volume rendering inside. So here's a camera outside and inside a volume mesh. So that's outside, obviously, and that's inside. So that's very cool. Obviously, though, I think if you enabled backface culling, that wouldn't work, but I guess we'll see. Support for cubic voxel interpolation. So this is helpful, especially for low-res smoke simulations to avoid artifacts. Can be found below the volume sampling method menu inside the properties editor. Oh, okay. More shaders. So yeah, I have to do a little bit more testing on that. But it looks like below the volume sampling method menu. Properties, volume sampling. It's the same as before. So I'm not too sure on what they're talking about there entirely. So yeah, I'm not. You guys explain it to me. But the smoke obviously looks a lot better. So linear and cubic voxel. So linear and cubic. Optimizations. So they've made some optimizations for some different nodes, which is nice. Again, the Maxwell GPUs are supported. Quick smoke. So some faster smoke. Volume step size now has a different range, and support for specular color in solid shading mode available in the material panel. I guess because I've been using daily builds, I've been so used to this, but before you only had viewport color, now you have viewport specularity, and I've actually used this in a lot of my videos. So when you go to add a material now, so I've got material 001, I could change, so let's change the viewport color to blue, but see how the specularity is white? If we change the specularity to green, it's hard to see, but now where the light's hitting it, it's a green specularity, and I'm sure if I added a glossy shader it'd be even more apparent. So yeah, I completely forgot because I've been using daily builds that had this for the last month or so. So yeah, you can now do viewport color as well as viewport specularity, so that helps you preview things a little bit better. So that is about all I'm going to talk about. There's a bit more in the release notes, and I'm sure it's going to get updated as the days go by and weeks go by. And like I said, I expect a release, like I said, early January. I would say the 1st of February at the most. So yeah, test out the new features. Let me know if there's anything I missed or did something stupid about, and have fun, guys, because there's some neat add-ons. But again, I'm gonna emphasize this isn't like, oh my god, it's better than Maya now. There's some nice additions, there's some good bug fixes, but it's not like a brand new program. We go through this with every Blender release, or minor release, I should say. People go, oh my god, new release, I'm so excited, it's going to be so amazing. And then they're disappointed because it's basically the same program all over with maybe one or two features added. This is the case we have here. Anyways, thanks for watching from the team here at BlenderTech.com. If you enjoyed this video and learned something, please like it, and don't forget to subscribe for more videos daily. We're now on Twitter at twitter.com/BlenderTech. That's at Blender_Tech, and Facebook at Facebook.com/BlenderTech page, all one word. If you want a hard copy of our videos, just let us know. If you dislike this video for some reason, don't just hit the dislike button and leave. Instead, leave a comment or email us at info@blendertech.com if it's private about what you did not like, so that we can continually improve our videos based on your community input. We also take requests, so if there's anything you want, just let us know. You've seen our latest call for help videos. I've been emailing back and forth with people. I've been posting videos for people. So anyways, see you next time. Remember, create your way.